Hi and welcome back. In this section we're going to begin implementing reverb on a few of the elements, mainly the drums and the lead synth. This will help in giving the song a greater sense of space and also to sort of spice up individual sounds and make them a little bit less mundane. So the first drum on our list is the kick drum. In this particular track I don't think reverb on the kick is necessary. Generally speaking, I rarely put reverb on kick drums, but if you ever do, be mindful of what frequency range the reverb is going to occupy. Now because kick drums are made up primarily of low frequencies, the reverb can exaggerate them and quickly muddy up the entire track. If you want to use reverb on a kick, you want to be sure that it has appropriate high frequency content to apply reverb to, and then remove any necessary low end from that reverb signal. You might also want to mono the reverb depending on the song. So since we already have a clap send set up, let's first look at getting the reverb right there. I'm going to solo all of the drums in the playlist from bars 41 to 45 and then loop them. So let's go back to the mixer and solo clap 2 for a second, which is the clap we haven't looked at yet. As you can hear, this clap has a relatively long tail when compared with clap 1. So here's clap 1, and then clap 2. And it's for that reason that I'm only going to place reverb on clap 1, as I don't want to overdo the resulting tail sound of the claps combined. So let's start adjusting the parameters to find a nice balance. I'll make it a little less mono, and definitely remove some of the high end. Generally speaking, I always make cuts to a reverb's frequency range, as this is mostly where problems occur. So too much low end will muddy things up, whereas too much high end can make things seem too sharp and keep it from having a good balance within the overall song. So the next thing I want to look at is the decay and pre-delay, and for this I'll be referring back to the delay time chart from testtone.com, which I've temporarily made the background so that we can easily cross-reference. So let's begin by putting the reverb to a value of 1 measure, which is 1.8 seconds roughly. And now let's try cutting it in half to 0.9 seconds. So in the case of this song, I think the longer time of 1.8 seconds works well, and it's not a particularly busy track, and so you can afford to be a bit more generous with the reverb. So now let's tempo sync the pre-delay and try shifting it. Sometimes I find this works, whilst other times I leave it at 0. So I'll put it up to about halfway to begin with and then slowly bring it down to see what sounds best. I think leaving the pre-delay at 0 sounds better. Turning the pre-delay up too much causes a sort of rhythmic effect, which I think interferes with the overall pattern. So now we can move on to the hats, and what I'll do is go up to insert 15 in the mixer, and I'll just create a reverb insert which I'll group together beside the rest of the drums on the mixer. So press F2 to rename, and like before I'm just going to hold Alt on the keyboard and use the directional keys to just move it across and group it up with the rest of the other drums. And I'll just solo out the hats and reverb send for the time being, and like before we want to make sure that no dry signal enters the reverb, as that will just multiply the initial transient volume of the hats. Since the hats are playing a pretty quick 16th note pattern, I want to be careful not to overdo the reverb here, so let's aim for something that sounds well balanced. I also want to be mindful of the reverb, of how the reverb affects the high frequency content of the hats, as too much will result in a harsh, sharp sounding result. So I'm going to go ahead and do a bit of EQing and put the room size to full to begin with. Now if we go back to the chart and choose a sort of short decay time, I'll go for a 16th note just to go with the pattern, which is about 0.1 seconds roughly. It doesn't have to be, precise. And we may want to turn the room size down to compensate for the short decay and help it sound a bit more sort of natural and blended. So let's just turn all the drums back on and see if any further tweaking is required. Okay, so that'll do for the drums. Now let's move on to the lead synth. Now since this is the most prominent element of the whole song, it can potentially benefit from some reverb. On the flip side though, we must be careful not to overdo it given how dominant it actually is in the mix. So I'm going to solo the synth out within the playlist and play it before we begin. Now you may notice there's a slight delay in the background which comes as part of the preset within Citrus. I don't think it's troublesome for now, so we can just leave it be and see if the addition of reverb helps it even further. So like before, let's set up a reverb send on the mixer and get everything linked up. And I'll begin by setting the value of the decay to 1 measure, which is 1.8 seconds, and turning the room size up to full. And as you can hear, things are quite muddy right now, so the first thing to do is EQ out all of those kind of problem frequencies, especially in the low region. I'll bring in the other elements back in and like before, make any necessary changes if need be. So I think those settings help to brighten things up a little bit overall. Feel free to apply reverb to any element you think might benefit from it, and be sure to experiment with all sorts of different settings. For instance, you might want to try using the diffusion function on the likes of percussion sounds to help give them extra character and so on. So next up we'll be taking a look at delay, and I'll see you there.